Linux Mint is regularly recommended as one of the best Linux distributions for beginners. It is a stable, familiar, easy to install, and it gives Windows users a comfortable path to Linux, so they say. But what happens when the stability comes at the expense of the developers who actually create the software Mint distributes? A GNOME Calendar developer has publicly described Linux Mint as a hostile downstream provider, accusing the distribution of shipping an outdated version of GNOME, almost 2 years outdated. It's frustrated users back to GNOME to support. Now, this is a 2-year out-of-date GNOME Calendar version. GNOME reportedly asked Mint to remove its support links, change the application's branding, and stop presenting the modified package as though it were still supported by the original developers by GNOME. Linux Mint did not agree. They keep on shipping the product as it's a regular up-to-date product, which it's not. And now the argument is exposing one of the biggest problems in desktop Linux. Who is responsible when a distribution modifies and freezes someone else's software and sends them back to the original developers for support? So I've heard that there was a lawsuit about GNOME trying to sue Mint into removing the GNOME branding or GNOME Calendar branding, but that's false. So before we go any further, let's correct some of the headlines circulating online. GNOME has not filed a lawsuit against Linux Mint. This is currently not a courtroom battle, and the GNOME Foundation has not sued Mint over its name or application icons due to the multi-year distribution of old, or they're not suing over the fact that Mint ships by default a version of GNOME Calendar that is at least 2 years old. The dispute involves GNOME Calendar developers asking Linux Mint to remove upstream support links and rebrand the outdated version it distributes to something Mint-styled. The distinction matters. This is not really a trademark lawsuit. It's a fight over responsibility, support, branding, and the relationship between upstream developers and downstream Linux distributions. But honestly, that may have more important ramifications than a lawsuit, because the problem affects nearly every Linux distribution out there, just not Mint solely. It's really LTS Linux distributions. What Mint is doing, Linux Mint, is based primarily on Ubuntu's long-term support releases. That gives Mint a stable foundation, but it also means some applications can remain on older versions for a longer time because long-term support, they don't add the newest, latest, greatest required versions of dependencies. Linux Mint has reportedly been holding GNOME Calendar back instead of shipping newer upstream releases. There can be legitimate technical reasons that maybe they don't have people to support the newer versions of GNOME. Newer GNOME applications increasingly depend on newer versions of JTK, libwata, GNOME libraries, and other components that may not fit cleanly into Mint's current desktop environment or LTS long-term support Linux distributions. Mint also has its own design philosophy. The developers want applications to integrate properly with Cinnamon and respect traditional desktop features, themes, window controls, and user preferences. That is understandable if you don't have people that help back your distribution, volunteers, because remember, it's free and open source software. So if a user wants something, they might have to upgrade it themselves and provide it to the packaging for Mint or long-term service distributions. Linux Mint should not be forced to rebuild its entire desktop every 6 months just because GNOME changed its platform. Understandable, it's a manpower thing. However, Mint is still distributing an application carrying GNOME Calendar's identity. When users encounter bugs, they may follow the application support links and report those problems directly to GNOME, not to Mint where they need to be directed to. The GNOME developers then receive bug reports for versions they no longer support, including problems that may have already been fixed in newer releases that could be years old already. That is where this stops being a simple package version disagreement between upstream and downstream providers. Imagine that you build an application. You'll understand why GNOME is so angry. Another organization takes an old version, modifies it, holds it back for years, and just distributes it to thousands of users or more. Those users then contact you whenever something breaks on your old version. You examine the reports and discover that many of the bugs were fixed several releases ago, or in other words, years ago. You ask the distributor to update the application or at least remove your support links and give its modified version a different identity. Then nothing meaningful changes. That is essentially the GNOME developer's argument. From GNOME's perspective, Linux Mint receives the benefit of shipping GNOME Calendar while pushing part of the support burden back onto unpaid upstream developers that waste developers' time. Instead of improving GNOME Calendar, maintainers must investigate reports involving an old downstream package they do not control or no longer support. The GNOME developer says this has happened for years and that earlier attempts to resolve the problem were unsuccessful. Eventually, the developer opened an issue in Linux Mint's GNOME Calendar package repository requesting that Mint remove links pointing to GNOME support, resources, and update applications branding. The request was not to stop Mint from using the open source code. The request was essentially this: you can continue maintaining your own version, but do not make users believe that we, as in GNOME, still support it. You should maintain your own version. Linux Mint side, Linux Mint also has a reasonable argument. Open source license allows distribution to modify packages and distribute software. That freedom is one of the foundations of Linux. Distributions are merely delivering services for upstream projects. They integrate thousands of independent components into a working operating system. Mint considers stability, desktop integration, compatibility, theming, translations, accessibility, and long-term support. But updating one application may require new app libraries that affect dozens of other packages. That's the issue with long-term support Linux itself. Mint also believes that support problem could be solved with improved bug report templates, clearer version information, or better coordination between the projects, even though GNOME has moved on past Mint's versioning, years past. And we should be careful about portraying the entire Linux Mint project as malicious because one heated disagreement over a package that's been outdated. Linux Mint has contributed enormously to the Linux desktop environment. Cinnamon, Nemo, Timeshift, Warpinator, and Mint's update tools have given users practical alternatives that other desktops aren't providing. That's true. Mint also has helped thousands, probably millions, if not millions, of users to leave Windows. That matters for Linux. So basically, Linux Mint is a stepping stone to better distributions. That's my personal opinion. But being important to Linux does not mean Mint should be immune from criticism. How Mint could be hurting Linux? Well, the real problem is not that Linux Mint ships older software. Stable distributions have also done that. The problem is what happens when responsibility becomes unclear. When users see the GNOME Calendar name and icon, they assume GNOME supports that application, even though it's been outdated and upgraded and bug fixed already. When GNOME receives support for Mint-specific or outdated behavior of long-term Linux distributions, upstream developers lose time. When Mint refuses to rebrand its heavily held back package, GNOME feels that its identity is being used without corresponding maintenance responsibilities. This creates resentment between projects that are supposed to be collaborating, and that is how Linux hurts itself. Not because open source provides too much freedom, but because projects sometimes use that freedom without clearly accepting the obligations that come with it. Update the packages. Linux Mint has every right to maintain an older fork. Let them do that. But when a downstream version really diverges from upstream versions, Mint should probably do one of three things. Update it. That's the best answer. Maintain and support it directly. They don't want to do that. Or rename it so users understand that it's a Mint managed application. Mint already has done this successfully with other applications: Zed, XReader, XViewer, Pix, Honeynoptics, or Hypenoc. All give Mint greater control over its desktop experience without placing the same expectations on another upstream project. Creating a Mint calendar application could resolve much of this confusion, or just rebrand the calendar that they use and remove GNOME's name. GNOME is not completely innocent. GNOME also might get some criticism, but we'll talk about that. GNOME's rapid platform changes can make life difficult for stable distributions or long-term distributions. Applications are often tightly connected to the latest GNOME technologies and design decisions. That works well when the entire GNOME stack moves together. It works less well for Cinnamon, Xvice, and distributions built on long-term support releases. GNOME developers sometimes appear to treat their applications as components of the GNOME platform rather than independent Linux desktop applications. The approach is technically valid, but it also creates friction when those applications are distributed. The language used during the dispute also became unnecessarily hostile, calling an entire distribution a hostile downstream distribution may express genuine frustration, but it makes cooperation more difficult. Once the argument becomes GNOME versus Mint, people stop discussing packages and support responsibilities and start defending their favorite desktop or distribution. Really, it does solve nothing. So the bigger Linux problem, controversy, is bigger than just GNOME Calendar or Linux Mint. It exposes the tension between rolling distributions and stable distributions, between upstream innovation and downstream reliability, between developers who want running the latest release and distributions that promise years of stability. You see the same problem in Debian, Ubuntu, Enterprise Linux, Arch, container images, browser packages, and even server software. Who owns the support burden? The original developers, distribution, the package maintainers, or users who choose an older release? The answer should be made obvious before the user submits a bug report. A distribution should never silently hand upstream developers responsibility for a version it deliberately modified or froze. My take: I don't believe Linux Mint is ruining Linux per se. I think LTS versions of Linux are a negative for Linux. That's my personal take on it. That would be an unfamiliar and obvious exaggeration, but in the situation, I believe GNOME's core complaint, Linux Mint should either update GNOME Calendar, take full responsibility for supporting its version, or rebrand the package to a Linux Mint package to take that burden away from GNOME. Mint cannot have it both ways. It cannot maintain an outdated downstream version while allowing users to believe that upstream GNOME developers are responsible for fixing it. At the same time, GNOME needs to recognize that stable distributions cannot always follow its release cycle or adopt even new platform dependencies immediately. But in Mint's case, 2 years is crazy. I can see 6 months. That's okay. Personally, I like to update as fast as possible, but in reasonable. I want something that's tested on my favorite Linux, my current desktop, make sure it works. I don't want day zero like Arch and it breaks the system. You have to troubleshoot it for days to make it work. Both projects have valid technical concerns, but the support links and branding should clearly identify who maintains that package users are actually running, and maybe say how old is that package that they're running. That is not an attack on open source freedom. You can run whatever version you want. That's up to you. But where's the accountability for that old package? What do you think? Should Linux Mint rename its version of GNOME Calendar and take full responsibility for supporting it? Or is GNOME trying to exercise too much control over open source software that Mint has every legal right to modify? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy honest discussions about Linux, OpenSUSE, KDE Plasma, immutable desktops, and home web technology, subscribe to my channel, Gumshoe Tech, because sometimes the biggest problem in Linux are not technical. They are what happens when open source projects stop communicating with each other. Have a great day.